You only get one chance to make a good first impression. So when you're introducing yourself to someone new, or maybe you're being introduced to someone new, you want to make sure that you get the greeting, the introductions right. You don't want to make any mistakes or leave a bad impression. You could be in a situation where you're meeting many people. You're not going to get a second chance to kind of overcome that bad first impression. So you want to make sure you do it right. That's what we're going to talk about today. Business English introductions and greetings. 5 important tips. Stay tuned. Greetings, colleagues. I'm Timothy Barrett, and this is the 4 Business English Rundown. This is a show for people from all over the world who want to improve their professional communication skills in English. So today we're going to talk about introductions and greetings, and we're going to go over 5 important tips. Now, the first one is the greeting. When you meet someone, especially in a formal or even semi-formal setting, you want to make sure that you give a real greeting. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're meeting someone casually, a close friend, a close colleague, a coworker you see every day, or maybe even a family member, you might just say, "Hey, how are you? What's up? How you doing?" Something like that that's just kind of casual. But when you're meeting someone, especially for the first time, that would not be appropriate. You want to put your best foot forward, and you want to be a little bit more formal than you would be if you knew them or you saw them every day. Now, normally, what kind of greeting am I talking about? The 3 standards are good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time of day. If it's before noon, you'd say good morning. If it's in the afternoon, you say good afternoon. And if it's in the evening, maybe after 5, after 6 p.m., then we'd say good evening. And that's really the standard that you'd want to follow. If you're meeting someone in a very formal setting, or like I said, it could be less formal, maybe a semi-formal or more casual setting, you still want to stick with those standard greetings. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon. Tip 2, repeat their name. If when you greet them, you know their name, maybe they just introduced themselves, somebody else introduced them to you, you want to repeat their name. For example, let's say it's after lunch and you're meeting Paul, you'd say, "Good afternoon, Paul." Or maybe you're meeting, Mr. Smith. "Good afternoon, Mr. Smith." So you use the greeting plus their name. Now, why is it important to use their name? For a few reasons. It's very important to try to remember their name. And repeating their name in the very beginning, and then maybe during the conversation, put in their name. Try to use their name. That's a good technique to help you remember their name. And if you're saying it wrong, getting it wrong, they'll correct you. It will be less embarrassing at the very beginning than if you've had 5 or 10 conversations with them and you don't know their name or you don't know how to pronounce their name. It's much easier at the beginning. Now, if their name is a very difficult name to pronounce, and maybe you don't want to try it, I can understand that. Depending on the difficulty of the name, maybe you want to skip this step. But generally speaking, you do want to say their name at the very beginning. Good afternoon, Paul. Good afternoon, Mr. Smith. And during that conversation, put it in. Now, another reason we want to do that is people like to hear their own name. Psychologically, it's a very powerful trick. We all like to hear our name. So when you're talking to someone and you're including their name, it's in the normal conversation. I don't mean you're using it every sentence. That would be a little too excessive. But if you're using their name in the conversation, you're including their name while you're talking to them, it'll give you maybe a little bit of an edge. They might feel a little bit more positive towards you. And 2 more reasons that we want to repeat the name, especially in the beginning, good afternoon, Paul, good afternoon, Mr. Smith, is 1, it's polite. So it's the correct way to be introduced to someone, introduce yourself, to repeat their name. But also, if you're getting the name wrong, it allows them to correct it right at the spot. Maybe you've been introduced to him as Mr. Smith, or you're not sure, should I call him by his first name or his last name? So to be a little bit more formal, you might say, good afternoon, Mr. Smith. And now it's his turn. He could say, "Oh, no, call me Paul. Don't worry about that." Or, he might say to you, "Oh, good afternoon, Mr. Barrett." Let's move on to the third tip. State your name. I am Timothy Barrett, or my name is Timothy Barrett. Normally, you want to include your first and last name. So I might say something like this: Good afternoon, Paul. My name is Timothy Barrett. Now, if you have a nickname, or maybe your name is difficult to say, so you have maybe a shortened name or an easier name to say, then you might want to include that. My name is Timothy Barrett, but you can call me Tim, or many people call me Tim. Something like that is perfectly fine. Now, why include both versions? Well, what do you go by when you email someone? Then you want to use that same name. You don't want them to say, "Oh no, that's not the person I met. I met, Tim. This is Timothy," or something like that. It might be confusing. Now, maybe it's very, very clear that you're the same person, but maybe you want to make it clear. So you want to include any variations of your name. That's fine to include at the very beginning. And of course, if you have a business card, it may be good to exchange business cards. Then they have the full name there as well as contact information. So that can always be good, especially if you're in a networking situation. Now, I would also include your position, your title, the company that you're at, that sort of thing. If it's not clear from the meeting, I mean, maybe they already know who you are, so you don't need to specify those things. But if you're meeting someone out of the blue, you're at a networking event, a conference, something like that, you want to make it clear, what do you do? What is your position? What's your title? What company do you work for? And that will help them kind of understand who you are. And maybe if you want to do business later, they'll, oh, yeah, that's the guy who works at this company, or he specializes in this, he deals with that. Those are things that you want them to remember you for. In the fifth and final tip, ask them a question. When you meet someone for the first time, especially in a networking event or something like that, after you get past the initial greetings, sometimes, well, gee, what do we say now? Oh, okay, I'm going to go over here, and then the conversation ends, and you're probably never going to talk to that person again. So instead of that, it's good to have a question ready, something that you can ask them. Now, of course, you don't want to ask something very personal or something like that that's going to turn them off, especially if you just met them. But you want to ask them something about their profession or maybe about the meeting that you're at, the conference that you're at, the training you're at, whatever it is. But you want to have some kind of question, and then that'll try to keep the conversation going. Now, the best questions are about them, again, not too personal, but something that gets them talking about what they do. Now, if you ask a general question like, "Oh, what do you do?" or, "You work at so and so, you work at Acme Limited, what do you do there?" Now, that's not a bad question, but it's kind of open-ended. And do you think, especially if you're in a networking event, maybe he's meeting, 5, 10, 20 other people. Does he get that question before? So maybe it's not the best question. It's not the worst. But a better question might be, listen specifically to what he does and then ask a specific question about that. What about these types of cases? Do you deal with those as well, or was that outside? Or what do you think about these types of cases? Have you ever dealt with those? Ask them something kind of specific like that, and then give them a chance to respond. Oh yeah, I deal with those all the time, or oh no, I don't deal with those. They're over here. But ask them some question and try to keep the conversation going. The more that you can get them to talk, probably the better the connection will be, the deeper the connection will be. So even, when you move on, you start to talk to other people, they might still remember you, and maybe at the next meeting or when the conference is over and you both go back home, maybe they'll remember and maybe build that networking connection later on versus just meeting someone or meeting 10 or 20 people. And then at the end of the night, you really have no connections. Nothing is going to last longer than that night. All right, hopefully this was interesting for you. If you got something out of it, then it's time to conquer that like button and make it ours. If you enjoyed this video, then check out some of our other videos. I'm sure you're going to like those just as much. Work hard today and enjoy tomorrow.